Morning will today accuse the Tory party of waging war on charities and civil society in what he'll call a desperate, divisive and damaging attempt to cling on to power by creating a culture war.
He's also going to say that the Conservatives have demonised the RNLI with their rhetoric on migrants crossing the Channel instead of working with them to stop the small boats. There's sort of two organisations that come under specific scrutiny. It's the RNLI and also the National Trust. The Labour leader's going to say a little bit later, this sounds sort of sensible, straightforward. He wants to create a society of service, hailing charities and volunteers as the glue that helps bridge the gaps. But then he's going to go on to say, well, the Conservatives have waged war in that area.
So my opinion, we're just waiting for Steve Reid, Shadow Environment Secretary, good friend of the show, to just get mic'd up. But my view would be this is a defining moment because there are millions of people in this country who respect these organisations, but there are also millions of people in this country who think it's ridiculous, the things that have happened. So for me, it's a dividing line. Let's get straight to it now, because joining us on College Green, Shadow Environment Secretary Steve Reid. Morning, Steve. How are you, me old son? You all right?
Morning, Jeremy. Good to be with you again.
Look at you, all wrapped up and heading for power. Let's talk firstly about the reason you're on, actually, because it is something I think that will have cross-party support. This decision, quite rightly, water company bosses awarding themselves apparently, allegedly, up to £25 million in bonuses and incentives, irrespective of the fact they're filling our rivers and our seas with sewage. Basically, Labour are going to do what if they get to power, Steve?
Well, make sure that can't happen. You know, when your viewers will know the state that our rivers and lakes and beaches are in, with record levels of sewage swilling through them, destroying the environment, putting kids' health at risk, frankly, if you take them for a paddle, and damaging tourism businesses. And yet, since 2019, since the last general election, the water bosses overseeing all of this, responsible for the severe level of illegal sewage discharges, have paid themselves £25 million in bonuses and incentives, basically rewarding themselves for failure. So what Labour's saying is we need to focus their minds on fixing the problems in the water industry. So we will give the regulator the power they need to ban bonuses being paid to water bosses who are overseeing severe illegal sewage dumping in our rivers. It's as straightforward as that.
It goes further than that, though, doesn't it, Steve? Making water bosses face personal criminal liability for repeated law breaking.
That's right, and that's a standard practice across most of society and business, to be fair. But at the moment, if you've got we've had this problem going on for years. The government's turned a blind eye to it, and the water bosses who are responsible for overseeing illegal sewage dumping, this isn't the licensed kind of emissions that are allowed when there are severe weather events. This is repeated severe illegal dumping of raw sewage into our rivers and our seas. Now, if you are the boss that is overseeing that, and if you are allowing reports of what's actually going into the river to be downgraded and covered up in order to boost profitability and help yourself get a bonus, then that kind of behaviour can't be tolerated. Now, what I hope will happen is that Labour will give the regulator these additional powers that they need. That will focus the minds of the water bosses on cleaning up the waterways before they look at paying themselves bonuses for that failure. I don't think consumers should be facing rising bills for the money to simply disappear into the bank accounts of water bosses' bonuses while the work necessary to clean up our rivers is not being carried out.
I actually said it earlier, Rosie, I said it to you, Steve, I don't believe anybody of any political persuasion will disagree with that as a policy at all. I think
people are fed up with what's been happening to our waterways. Steve, I want to talk to you about Starmer's...
I mean, that's a really good point that Jeremy... I think that's a really good point, because I do think, we could wait until the next general election for, if a Labour government is elected, for us to implement it, or the government that we've got at the moment could get on and do this. And if they want to steal this Labour policy, I will back them in any vote they want to call in the House of Commons, House of Parliament. Right,
Lucy Fraser in about an hour's time.
Fraser.
Steve, Keir Starmer in about, later on today, is going to be talking about sort of... He's leaning into the culture wars, but this time to paint his own agenda. Can you just sort of lay out his case?
Well, what Keir is saying is that we need to be supporting civil society. You know, all those people that volunteer, that get involved in society, that join organisations like the National Trust, and there are tens of millions of them. They want to make a positive contribution to our country. Now, all parties used to support these organisations, but recently you've had the Conservative government going around and attacking these organisations instead of working with them. Now, that I think isn't helpful. It's not productive. We need a much more engaged society. We need a stronger civil society. I've met the heads of many of these organisations. They're at a loss as to why the government keeps attacking them. And we need to stop weaponising the woke agenda and start looking at the positive contribution that civil society can make to the future and the life of our country.
Are you not also using those institutions, the National Trust, the RNLI, as a bit of a political football for your own PR means now?
Well, I think it's important that any government or potential government stands up and supports these great national institutions that do such an amazing job for our country. You know, I'm proud to be a member of the National Trust. I enjoy going to visit their properties. They're protecting the heritage of our country for all of us who live here and for future generations. That's fantastic work. And I think they deserve our support, not our criticism. But I think generally, part of building a stronger society, part of strengthening links between people, means that we support civil society, we support voluntary action, we support those people who want to give up their time to help everybody else. That is a vital part of the glue that binds our country together, and they deserve our support.
Steve, you and I have had many conversations over the years, and one of the things that I like about this job is there are two sides to every argument, and people should have an opinion in a democracy. I'm going to place to you my old man, yes, no longer here, but in the latter years of his life living in Somerset, signed up to work for the National Trust and would put on his tweed jacket after mother had died and go and show people around and have his sandwiches and whatever. If I'd sent him to work, and this is, I think, a point that millions of people will understand, if he'd gone to work in that Norfolk stately home that 2 years ago said you can't be front of house, whoever you are, in this wonderful organisation, whether you're a volunteer or whatever, unless you wear a rainbow gay pride badge, he'd have walked out of there, not because he's anti anything like that, because he would say, that's somebody telling me to do something while I'm volunteering. Those are the very stories that people jump upon, OK? They will always jump upon that, and that's what I think the Tories... I think Starmer has to be careful. I'm not actually criticising him because I think it finds a line now, but my old man would have given his job up. Do you understand where I'm coming from on that?
Yeah, no, I'm with your old man on that one. No one's saying there shouldn't be any conversation or any debate. It's just it's gone too far.
Yeah.
I think what they're trying to do, they're trying to weaponise relatively minor incidents and make out as if these organisations are only focused on that. They're not. The National Trust's primary focus is on preserving the heritage of our country, and they do an incredible job of that. Of course you'll find things where they've done wrong, and it's fair to call them out on that, and everybody will do that. But don't let's pretend that means the whole organisation is failing, because it isn't. They're so valuable. I mean, I think there's tens of millions of us that are members of the National Trust, to be honest, because they do such a fantastic job, and I love supporting them.
It's great to hear your kind of vision for policy when it comes to how you deal with the water bosses. Quickly, I just want to ask you, Steve, HS2, there are some sort of rumours, murmurings that potentially before the next general election, the Conservatives won't sell the land that they had bought to put the second leg of HS2. It gives you an opportunity, does it not, when you come into power to say, we could revive that leg. Are you looking at that?
Well, I mean, I won't be able to answer that, and nor will my colleagues, until we get nearer the election, because I won't know the state of the
But is it something you consider, or would you just say, we're ruling out, we can't do it at all? Have you totally ruled it out, or is there a bit of wiggle room to say, for all those businesses, everyone who is preparing to have this rail line?
As things stand, the money isn't there to go ahead with it. So, we can't just conjure up money out of nowhere. But my colleague Darren Jones, who's the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Rachel Reeves #2, is looking at what went wrong with that scheme, how the government was able to let the costs spiral out of control in the way that they did. And I'm sure they will be learning from that. I'm looking forward to hearing from Darren what he finds out when he reports, and I'm sure he'll be willing to come on your show as well and discuss that.
Steve, always a pleasure, mate, and thank you for joining us early morning in your scarf. Steve Reid, Shadow Environment... Good man.
Good to see
Shadow
you. Take care.
Environment Secretary, 7:15.